Carbon dioxide emissions in the UK have risen for the first time in 14 years, new figures show, and experts say it's because more people are buying petrol cars as they turn their backs on diesel. The government has come down hard on the under-fire fuel throughout 2017 as part of plans to reduce harmful emissions being pumped into the nation's air. This culminated in the Chancellor's decision last month to increase first-year tax for anyone who buys a new diesel car from April next year. But the decision to dissuade drivers from buying diesel might claim an unintended victim, the environment, an investigation has found. Department for Transport figures uncovered by car selling site year.Co.uk show that the average new car sold in 2017 produces more CO2 than one sold in 2016, reversing a continuous decline in greenhouse gas emissions on this measure since figures were published by the government in 2003. Official statistics for the first 10 months of 2017 show that the average new car sold this year produces 121.1 grams of CO2 per kilometre. The average CO2 output of new vehicles sold in 2016 was 120.3 grams km.With diesel registrations widely expected to stall further in December. It will spell the end of a 14-year reduction in CO2 emissions, which have declined by 4.02 grams kilometre annually since records first began. Cars.Co.uk said the increase in average CO2 outputs was due to a 16% slump in diesel vehicle sales this year. Registrations of new diesels have been hammered by increased taxes as well as the introduction of the T charge in central London, parking surcharges in big cities and the threat of new low-emissions zones across the country that would force owners to pay more to use their cars. Diesel has been under scrutiny since the VW Group's emissions cheating scandal in 2005, when cars were found to be emitting up to 40 times more harmful nitrogen oxides, NOx, than official figures suggested. While diesel sales have slumped on the back of the crackdown and fears of a greater one to come, petrol vehicles have held up, rather than the buyers shifting en masse to the expensive electric and hybrid models ministers would prefer motorists purchase. Despite the higher NOx outputs, there's no doubting that diesel cars produce less CO2 and are more efficient than petrol equivalents, making them better for the environment, which is why previous governments incentivized motorists to buy them with a carbon dioxide-based car tax system. According to the latest figures from the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders, SMMT, 193,281 fewer diesel had been sold in the UK by the end of November. On the other hand, petrol registrations were up by 38,050 units, while alternative fuel cars, including electric, hydrogen and hybrid-powered vehicles, were ahead by 28,611 compared to the same time last year. Experts have now warned that the higher number of petrol cars hitting the road compared to diesel threatens to derail the government's ambitious climate change targets. car manufacturers are already under pressure to meet an EU target of cutting average CO2 emissions across their ranges to 95 grams kilometre by 2021, but the recent demonization of diesel has sparked concerns that these objectives won't be met if manufacturers can't even shift low-emissions diesel cars that comply with the existing EU Euro 6 standards. Tamsin Saxon, director at the SMMT, said, "If industry is to meet challenging CO2 targets, getting more of the latest low-emission diesels onto our roads is crucial, as they can emit 20% less CO2 than the equivalent petrol models." She blamed confusion around government air quality plans and taxation for plummeting diesel sales, and warned, if new diesel car registrations continue on this negative trend, UK average new car CO2 levels could indeed rise this year. A Department for Transport spokesman responded to the suggestion that carbon dioxide emissions will increase, saying, "We will seek to maintain ambitious targets and our leadership position, and intervening firmly if not enough progress is being made." Our ambitious clean growth strategy includes investing nearly £1.5 billion in accelerating the rollout of ultra-low-emission vehicles by 2020, generating business opportunities and leading to cleaner air and lower greenhouse gas emissions. And experts have suggested that car makers can still trim the CO2 outputs of their vehicles, even if diesel becomes less popular. The International Council on Clean Transportation, a research group that has led the campaign against harmful diesel emissions, said that advanced petrol engines, as well as electric and hybrid technology, could cut CO2 emissions significantly. Quite a lot of petrol vehicles do not use the latest technologies available and still have higher CO2 emissions than comparable diesel cars, said Peter Muck, managing director of ICCT Europe. However, the, unfortunately often repeated, statement that diesel cars are necessary to decrease CO2 emissions is simply wrong. Instead, hybridizing petrol vehicles and transitioning to electric vehicles today makes more sense for vehicle manufacturers. Monk also blamed the increased sales of SUVs, which are generally less fuel efficient than a hatchback alternative, for the spike in average CO2 outputs.